The topic for today's discussion is words that bind, weaving cultures through literature. So the scope is largely exploring the rich tapestry of Indian literature, literature as a medium of cultural preservation in northeastern Kerala, the role of translation in bridging regional literary divides, evolving trends in Indian literature, digital platforms and self-publishing, role of literature festivals in promoting regional writers, writing as an activism, literature and social issues, how literature influences and reflects political and cultural landscapes. Our chairperson for today's session is Professor Milind Sudhakar Marathe. He is the chairman of National Book Trust, India. Professor Marathe is an educationist, a teacher of technology in his core. Professor Marathe maintains a strong network with universities, colleges, schools, and libraries to enthusiastically promote reading culture through books and digital content, as is the habit of acquiring knowledge by young generation these days. Welcome, sir. Our moderator for this session is Mr. Asheesh Sharma, who is a popular figure, is a deputy editor and copy head of News 9 Plus, the world's first news OTT channel. He has delivered quality content at newspapers, magazines, TV channels, websites, and apps. He's an editor by training and storyteller by instinct since 1995. Welcome, Mr. Asheesh Sharma. Our next panelist who I will introduce is Ms. Bijoya Sawian, author and translator. Sawian's literary works, which comprise of her highly acclaimed translations from Khasi to English of indigenous culture of the Khasis. This has been published by Vivekananda Institute of Culture, Guwahati, and Khasi Press, Shillong. Welcome, Ms. Bijoya. Next comes Mr. Nikhil Alva. He's an award-winning producer, director, writer. His work has been screened on major broadcast networks and platforms all over the world. Then we have Ms. Jasmine Patton. Welcome. She's an author and assistant professor in Department of English, Gargi College, University of Delhi. She has diverse interests ranging from oral literature and history, translation, gender studies, culture studies, women's autobiographies, Indian writings in English, classical literature, and Western music. Yeah.
Jasmine is an associate professor.
Jasmine is an associate professor in English. I'd put it in your title, so I didn't read it. Okay. Mr. Hari Kumar, novelist and screenwriter, welcome aboard. He was born in Cochin and brought up in Gurgaon. He did his schooling from DAV Public School. He has authored several books. He has penned the story and screenplay for a Malayalam movie and a Hindi language psychological horror thriller. Welcome, Mr. Hari Kumar. I'd like to hand the floor over to our moderator, Mr. Asheesh, today.
Thank you. See, the chairperson we have is among the senior most, but the most tech-savvy, as you can see. Now, we've had the formal introductions. These were our CVs. Now, let's, as they say, let the storytelling begin. We're all storytellers in our midst. India is a land full of thousands, millions of stories. And we like telling stories, we like narrating stories, we like listening to stories. So let me begin with Hari. Hari is the odd man out here because everybody else, I have an outsider's perspective, has a very strong Northeast connection. Hari is representing the India down the Vindhyas, the southern India. His focus has been on Kerala so far, but his last translation, I believe, is from the border region of Tulu. So let's begin with Hari. Please tell us what you do and why you do it.
So I am definitely the odd one out here because probably I'm the one with an engineering background. So, and yes, I am also a diasporic Malayali. So somebody who was brought up in Delhi. And to be honest, my fascination to tell stories, whether it's writing screenplays or stories or books or whatever, they all came from one single source, and those were the folk tales that my grandmother used to tell me. And it was not something I used to get every day because we lived in Delhi, in Gurgaon, and it was only during the summer vacations that my parents would, take us all back to Kerala. And there in that sleepy village in Trichur district, that's where my grandmother, during the power cuts, would narrate me these stories about all these supernatural entities like Brahmarakshas, Yakshis, Pretas and all. So those were the stories that fascinated me. And now I am, since I grew up in Delhi, I worked in Bombay and I still work in Bombay. So now, last year onwards, I started this journey where I'm trying to find out my roots in the southern part of the country. My ancestors, they come from Mangalore, which is in the southern part of Karnataka, also known as Tulu Nadu. My mother tongue is Tulu. So I try to document some of the oral literature from the region. And now I'm doing something very similar in Kerala as well. That's it.
Lovely. You mentioned your grandmother. That was the genesis of storytelling. Now we have Jasmine here. Her full name is Professor Nzanmongi Jasmine Patton. And she also talks about preservation of our cultural heritage through the oral storytelling tradition. Please tell us, Professor Patton, on why you do it and what is it you do. You engaged in translation, you teach English literature, but you're also going back to your roots again, your Naga roots. Please tell us a little about what you do.
Thank you, Asheesh. Firstly, for trying to get the pronunciation of my name right. Thank you also. I think thanks goes out to the audience also because it's a lazy Sunday and Sunday is that a day for sleeping in and leisurely, brunches. So thank you for bringing yourselves over here. As for me, as Asheesh and, like our session coordinator has introduced, currently I'm an associate professor of English in Gargi College and I have been a learner of literature for a very long time. I come from the Lotha Naga tribe, which is one of the 17 official tribes in Nagaland. And I've been teaching now for roughly around 17 years here in DU. So a little bit about why I write, why I translate. I have published a collection of stories from my native mother tongue, Lotha Naga, to English. I've also written a children's novelette based in Nagaland again. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I write, right? Yeah, so as a young child, I was always a voracious reader. Partially, it was, of my own interest. And I think partially also because of an accidental disposition. Because my father, in the early 1980s, he was doing his engineering in Calcutta. He had resumed it after I was born. And he had kept his engineering on hold, by the way, Hari, because he was doing his little DDLJ thing with my mother and grandfather, Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, trying to coerce my, maternal grandfather into allowing my mother. So he had taken, a break from engineering, and after I was born and after he had made sure that my grandfather was on his side, he went back to study. And so in Calcutta, I remember when he used to come back for his vacations, one of the gifts that he used to get for me were books. Of course, on a side note, it's also because his aesthetic sense did not meet with my mother's approval, but he started getting me books. So books were the gifts that I started getting, and that's how I started being introduced to the world of literature. And as I started reading books, like English classics, Indian classics, name them all, I realized that books were opening up my mind to worlds that I would otherwise not have known about. So, that was one of my first initiations. Secondly, of course, also because I come from a very strong background of oral storytelling. Till I think a good part of the mid-20th century, we did not have access, Nagas did not have access, or at least widespread access to literacy and education. And so, stories were all preserved in oral form. And so one of the things that I want to say here, and what I realized, as I grew up listening to these stories, is that our ancestors might not have been literate in terms of writing the word, but they understood the significance of the stories, of keeping the stories. And so definitely one of the purposes of telling the stories is to entertain. Secondly, as we all know, stories are also very pedagogic, right? To teach the younger generation sort of a code of conduct and all. But thirdly, also because they understood that stories are very instrumental in preserving cultures. And that is why if you, have encountered any of the Naga storytellers or Naga folk tales, you will see that it's a rich and beautiful fusion of, prose and poetry, song and story. And so, in the course of time, with the introduction and exposure to, oral as well as a written form, I then understood that storytelling is very intentional. And that is how I started writing about my stories. Also because out there in the popular imagination, there's not many stories about the Northeast, or if there is, then it's a very homogeneous understanding. So I decided that as a Lotha Naga, I must start writing on my behalf, on the behalf of my people and our shared culture. And that is how I started with my translation. Sorry, I took a little, too much of time, but that's what happens when you bring an educator and a teacher into a dais such as this. Thank you.
Right, we're all wiser. Now, that brings us to the chair. We have Professor Milind Marathe with us, and he's been spearheading some of the campaigns to take these traditions, these cultures, to remote parts of the country through the National Book Trust. Sir, please tell us a little bit about NBT's initiatives. Maybe you can touch a little about the translations of the Northeast region and Kerala a little more.
Thank you all. National Book Trust has published till now the books in 75 languages / dialects. So that is the volume. And in last year only we have published 3,700 titles in a year. No doubt they are not originally curated books. Originally curated books can be up to 200 plus. Then there will be translated books, again 100 plus. Major publication was reprints and revised editions of some of the very famous books of National Book Trust. Now, as far as the storytelling is concerned, my observation with the National Book Trust is, last 5 to 10 years after Corona, the parents and children have clearly understood the limitation of online so-called education. And that's why children are turning, or the parents are taking the children to the bookshop and they are purchasing. I will just say that the book sale proportion of National Book Trust is 40% of children book. And there is some additional part also. When I was a kid, and like Hari said, that we also listened the stories from my Azoba Ajji in Marathi. But at that time, the story was demons, king, queen, and you will find that at the end of the story, my grandmother clearly used to tell me the message of the story also, moral of the story, tatparya, nehemi khare bolave, speak truth. But now the situation is changed. Now today's young generation of the children don't like king and queen, demons, and definitely they are not at all liking moral of the story. They say that यार हमको आप बताओ हम तय करेंगे क्या है इसका moral, आप मुझे सिखाओ मत. So now this is a change, and so the National Book Trust is focusing on one story, one moral, but not clear cut, explicitly said, but one moral, one story, and that is making really historical things are making, as madam has said. The cultural values will be imbibed now through this, and the span of attention of the kids have gone down. So if you are writing a children's book, Don't write beyond 24 pages, that too with illustration.
What I did. I was smart.
So that is my experience, and we have conducted recently the book fair in Shillong, where we promoted Khasi books in good number. Recently, in last month, we promoted for the first time the book fair in Srinagar. That is the Chinar Book Festival, where we promoted Kashmiri, Dogri, these two languages. So I think that the storytelling through books is very, very important. And in today's family, grandfathers and mothers are not with the family. And so they are facing very serious problem. Who will tell the stories to our kids? That's why the book, story book, will come into picture. And I think I appeal to all the authors over here of different languages. Please write stories for the children, and NBT is there to help you.
So this is a great sentiment and great news for authors and the world of publishers that physical books are back in demand. Books are back. Now you mentioned the Khasi festival. The lady to my left, Bijoya Sawian, she's a fourth generation translator. Now, translation is something, we have that cliche, lost in translation. But we can turn it on its head and say discovered or found in translation. Some of the literary greats of the world would not have been found if it wasn't for translation. Bijoyaji, please tell us about the craft of translation and why you do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Alek Foundation and Anant Samagam and all of you who are here today. Translation, I'll tell you a story why I did the first, since it's about storytelling. But before that, I feel what is most important in order to connect, because we are talking about connecting through literature. I think the first thing that we must understand is that India is a country of immense diversity. And in order to connect, we must first learn to respect each other. Cutting across caste, class, creed, across everything. Without respecting, there can be no connection. So I'll tell you a story why I translated The Teachings of Elders, which is a Khasi book of ethics and etiquette. And one day, I mean, my two sons had joined Wellham Boys, and I was like, and we hadn't started a school, my husband and I was like, really, just doing nothing. So my aunt told me one day, in fact, she ordered me, she's my mentor, Sitiman Sawian. She said, you must translate The Teachings of Elders. And I looked at her and I said, 109 stanzas in perfect Khasi, when I'm not even a poet. So she said, if you don't translate this book, a very important aspect of Khasi, indigenous Khasi culture and tradition will sink into oblivion. That shook me. And that's how I started translating.
Lovely. We now move to Nikhil. Nikhil is known as a TV person. He's done great programming. It all ultimately boils down to good content, and that's what he's good at. But now he's made a literary foray. His new book is about the bombing of a particular part of the country which nobody likes to talk about. And maybe Nikhil, tell us a little about your book and why you made this late foray into fiction writing.
Yeah, so I'm here because I recently wrote a novel about, against the backdrop of the Mizo insurgency. 20-year-long brutal insurgency started in the mid-60s. The bombing of Aizawl is only one small aspect of what the story is about. It's really about two friends from different backgrounds and how the insurgency drives them in different directions and the resolution of that conflict. Going back to my background and why I became an author, I started off as a student of pure mathematics, very interested in computer programming. Went to St. Stephen's and did math, realized very quickly that math wasn't for me. and I was more passionate about music. So spent the first decade as a musician in a rock band, composing music for television and films and
How interesting.
other elements. So storytelling through music, really. Before stumbling inadvertently into producing, right? I started producing small documentaries at first. Those were the early days when we still were a one-channel kind of environment. You didn't have to be very talented to actually produce. You just had to be, be passionate, right? And you had to have ideas that you wanted to communicate through that medium. So I'd call it luck, stumbling into the opportunity of actually producing small films. They got noticed. Some of them won awards, and that led to bigger and larger, opportunities. The first decade of that journey was animal behavior films. Lions, tigers, leopards, right? Living on the Edge, India's first environment series that won a Green Oscar. And then in 2000, we just took the same skills that we had developed, which was animal behavior, and applied them to human beings.
Right.
And started reality television in India with Indian Idol,
Right.
which was the first series that we acquired the rights and created in India, which became a huge hit. And there were many others, right? That journey eventually led to a failed broadcasting venture, right, which was a disaster financially and otherwise. And then it led to a break with everything to do with media and storytelling because I was just burnt out. So I went off to study and do an MBA, do other kinds of stuff, before returning with and resetting really with a fresh perspective of focusing on ideas that I've wanted, right, to talk about and write about. And the first of those was this book that became If I Have to Be a Soldier. It was actually initially called The Wailing of the Bamboo, and it draws the roots of how the flowering of the bamboo in Mizoram once every 48 years leads to a famine, which in turn leads to this insurgency that goes on for 20 long years, and the terrible things that happen in that phase, including the bombing of Aizawl. So it was a work of passion. It took almost 3 years to complete. I'm now working on the movie screenplay, and I hope that it actually, it becomes a film in the next year or two. So
Lovely.
that's my story.
Now, the flavor of the month, you mentioned the adaptation from text to screen, from book to screen, now from book to OTT. You're talking about a screenplay. While going through your book, I thought it had the makings of a great web series. Tell us a little about, since you know the medium from inside out, writing for screen and writing for books is very different. But now they are at a crossroads. So are authors actually writing with OTT series in mind? Can that be consciously done? What are your views on that?
Okay, one thing that occurred to me through this process, I'm a visual person. I'm trained, worked basically because of movies and television. So I first sat down and wrote a screenplay of this idea, right? Which was the visual elements and how it flows and things. And then COVID struck, and I was stuck at home, and I thought, look, there's so much more in this. Let me try and write it into a novel. So it's actually the reverse with me. But I had no clue what I was getting into, and it was so difficult. It was so difficult. And hats off to authors who actually, it's because with a screenplay, it's like, there's a director who's actually going to bring the screenplay to life, right? So you're literally just a structural engineer. You're setting a structure and a direction, but the director actually brings it to life in terms of the colors and the sense and the smells and the emotions and everything else. But when you're writing a novel, you are everything. You're that structural engineer, the interior designer, the psychologist, right? So there's so many more layers that you need to add as an author when you're writing. So I think it's much tougher. But to address your question, I think yes. I think there are OTT platforms are hungry for content. They're looking for unique ideas, and the people who actually scout and go through this material looking for stuff are actually trained visually, right? They come from a visual background, so they're looking at scenes, they're looking at flows, they're looking at things that can easily translate. So yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity there today for new revenue streams for all authors. But I think you also have to be smart with your rights, because I think very often we just sign away everything. With this novel, I only gave HarperCollins publishing rights for India.
Right.
I retained movie, OTT, global digital rights, etc. So I think all authors can be more conscious about the value of the rights that they have.
That's a smart tip. Bijoyaji, now tell us a little, we take that discussion forward. Uh, you are a purist in a sense, but you're also a rebel in the other sense. You've talked about the oral storytelling tradition. Your books have brought the Khasi culture to the world. Please tell us a little about your own books. And also, what do you think of the idea of, say, writing an OTT series?
Yes, my book Shadow Men could possibly be a series because it's about the last bit of militancy in Meghalaya. And I wrote it on a night, I started the book on a night when the militants ran through my compound. And my brother Bijon, who was also a cop, he told me and his wife, come inside. So we sat inside, and the first thing I told my sister-in-law was, Anita, I hope the dogs are not been let out. She said, but these are militants. I said, yeah, but I'm sure they don't want to be militants. So she said, I think you have a different perspective. So I started this book, and it tells about the matrilineal system, why it is failing, and it's available here in this, why it's failing, and while there's a men's liberation movement, and about militancy, because I knew those boys. Those boys used to grow up on the hill, adjoining our estate. So I felt that I reached out to the world by explaining not only about Khasis and militancy, but about militancy and about unemployment of the youth. But my translations are totally, reaching out to the world, and I got very good, response, especially teachings of elders. And they asked me, why is it ethics and etiquette? So I said, for the Khasis, etiquette is not social grace. It is a form of worship. If you worship, if you respect anything animate and inanimate, you are revering the Creator. So we are not animists. We believe in one God, Ublay, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and everything He creates. That's why we are an egalitarian society, and respect is very important. In order to connect in any relationship, I think respect is very important. And then I wrote the main ceremonies of the Khasis, because most of the Khasis don't know of that we had ceremonies. In fact, a Christian friend of my aunt said, I don't know we had, because she's a third generation Christian. So then my aunt wrote this book on the marriage ceremony, which I've translated, and it wasn't easy. And Ublay is my great-grandfather's small book on the religion of the Khasis, Nyam Khasi. And the teachings of the elders is perennial. I mean, there's a line which actually touched me, which says, whatever you earn, whatever you gain, is useless if not by truth sustained. Even if very rich you become, if no one respects you, what use is the pomp? So this is the essence of Khasi, and I've enjoyed writing and translating and reaching out, because we learn from each other. But I always say, let's all respect each other's caste, creed, and class. There's no such thing.
Lovely. You mentioned one thing which stood out for me. You mentioned the matrilineal societies being more egalitarian. Let's ask Hari about them. Kerala, also matrilineal, more egalitarian. Your views on that, and are there stories emerging from that power dynamic?
So first of all, not the entire Kerala is matrilineal. There are only certain communities that are matrilineal. Similarly, even in the Tulunadu region, only certain communities, or let's say castes, are matrilineal. But what's being seen now is that it's being replaced. Okay, and in fact, while writing my book Daiva, which was my first non-fiction, and it documented the spirit worship of the Tulu people. And the communities that perform this spirit worship, they're mostly matrilineal. Okay, so that's where I got to learn a lot about this particular, because I don't come from that kind of a family, right? So for me, it was a new thing. But again, the dancers who are involved in this spirit worship, they are patrilineal. So it is believed that they have immigrated from Tamil Nadu via Kerala and entered the Tulu-speaking region. So this is what I can talk about it right now. But as for the screenplay part, which he mentioned earlier, the screenplay also comes with a certain syntax, and not everybody can read it, and not everybody can write it. So it's extremely difficult to make the reader read a screenplay. And these days, in my little experience in the last 4 or 5 years, what I've seen is that in the OTT, most people don't know to read a screenplay, and they end up imagining things which are not really there on the paper.
Lovely. Your books have been adapted on OTT already. The genre which you write in, it's folklore and horror. And you mentioned the biggest grossing film of this year is a film called Stree. We're not debating its, merits, demerits, but you can't debate its popularity, right?
There are conspiracy theories which I won't even...
Right. But that's a genre you dabble in as well. And not surprisingly, you mentioned that the communities which are practicing this were all matrilineal. So there's the Stree element to that.
But the Stree element hardly has any screen time in Stree Part 2. It's mostly driven by male actors. And to be honest, that's one area where I've been facing a lot of issues, because all my fiction work, except for the first and the second, I've written 8 books till now, and out of them 7 are fiction. And 4 of my fiction works have a female lead. And only 1 of them got adapted, and I myself adapted the screenplay. And I was lucky enough because if I decided to produce it, but nowadays OTTs don't even, now the things have changed. OTTs first wait for the theatrical response. That decides the commercials, that decides everything else, right? The budgets and everything. So unfortunately for theater, the dependency is still on male-centric stories. So I think during the COVID and pre-COVID times, OTT did open up. It did give, like Brahm, that's the web series that I wrote. It's based on my book, The Other Side of Her. It has a female lead. Kalki plays the plays the protagonist. I'm sorry, I shouldn't even call it female protagonist. It's a protagonist. But nowadays, I don't see those things happening. There's a demand for even just 3 months back, I was in Kerala. I was I was working on my directorial debut, and again, a female-centric film with 3 female characters and just 1 male character, who is not the villain, by the way. But again, the same thing, the theaters won't take this unless we get a pan-South India heroine. Somebody who is popular in Tamil, Kannada, and Telugu, not even Malayalam, Tamil, Kannada, Telugu. That's the kind of attitude that producers have, because we are just writers and directors. We don't really have the monies to make a film. So somewhere the money factor comes into play, because at the end of the day, the audience has to pay the tickets and watch the film.
Right, but your folk stories have also got an audience. Now we come to her. Her stories deal a lot about folk tales. Her next book is a retelling of folk tales, Naga folk tales for children. If we not just look at the commercials, but keeping that storytelling tradition alive. You mentioned there was no script, even for her. For Khasi, there was not a script for a long time.
Roman script in 1842.
Right. So how important is keeping the oral storytelling tradition alive? And also, we need to strike that balance. He mentioned keeping your rights. How do the tribe of authors also look at the popular aspects of it? Because if you strike that balance, and if you also make it a little commercially viable, are you ready for that trade-off of trying to make it more mainstream, more popular? Is that one way of keeping that tradition alive? Or is it going to state patrons like National Book Trust to keep that authenticity alive? Please tell us a little about that.
Okay, so thank you for the question. In fact, I was just having this conversation with Professor Marathe before the session started about how I, I support, and I'm also so happy that, you have houses and institutes like NBT still doing the good work at an affordable rate. Now, from where I come, Nagaland and the Northeast India region, one of the things that I'm very particular about as a writer is the affordability. If you were to ask me, would you like your stories to be read or would you like to make money? I think I would say I would like my stories to be read. Like the Rupa books, NBT books, you don't have to think twice about picking it up. And at this point of time, I think my intent is for the stories to go out and to be heard. The commercial bit of it comes secondary. So for me, that's one. Secondly, when it comes to folk tales and storytelling, as I've mentioned earlier as well, our storytelling goes beyond entertainment and pedagogy. It is, in fact, our stories are a kind of custodian and a kind of archive of the traditions and the culture that our people believed in. Like even in the stories that I've written out here, there are stories of, the tradition of, let's say, Lonyak. Lonyak in Lotha is like loosely translated. It's like the kind of like the waiting period when a proposed groom goes to the intended's house and works at the a bride's house for maybe a year or two till they prove their mettle as somebody who's suitable for their daughter. So through my stories, there's so much of culture. And there's so much of rehistoricizing happening. Also, for instance, now, because, like in my classroom, I teach about all kinds of literature, So Greek classical literature is also, one that I have been teaching for a couple of years. So I'm sure all of us here have heard about Helen of Troy, right? Yeah. Homer, Iliad is one, and then Odyssey is one. So there was this one eureka moment in one of my undergrad classrooms when I was talking about the heroine Helen weaving. Because as Helen was weaving, it might seem like a very female-centric thing, of course, weaving, women and all of that. But Helen was actually historicizing the war and what was happening in the war. So in a sense, she was also being a cultural custodian. But in the story, in the narrative, if you look at her, she's like a kind of a footnote, right? Yeah. So stories, that's when I realized, that was a eureka moment when I was like, even a Naga weaves, like, this is a mekhala, and I have, of course, reappropriated it into a skirt because it's more comfortable. But if you look at the weaves are not random. The weaves are also, they have an etymology and a story behind it, Sometimes it's, clothing talks about vela, it talks about, a woman wanting to be free out of the thresholds, etc. So there are so many different aspects to the oral storytelling. So for me, if you were to ask me my agenda is for my stories to be heard. And for people to know that beyond Northeast, the homogeneity that is out there, there is a Nagaland. In Nagaland, there are in fact hundreds of tribes. I'm just one among the official one, and I'm a Lotha Naga, right? Yeah. So I think my agenda and my intent is for my stories to be heard. Commercial, baad mein. I think that's what I would say, yeah. Thank you.
Right, there are thousands of stories. There's an ocean of stories in India. NBT is playing its role. How do we give a platform to each dialect? How do we give a platform to each of the storytelling traditions? And what are we doing to actually go out there and find these storytellers? Because sometimes she mentioned there would be a language bias. There would be English language is more approachable, more commercial. How do we give storytellers in their own tongue an opportunity, a chance to tell the fascinating stories they've heard from their ancestors and narrate it in their own tongue? Because after all, there are certain nuances in each language which English can never match up to.
Very good question, actually. Now, printed books, e-books, and audiobooks. These are the three nature of the books at present NBT is dealing with. And the sell and the demand of e-books, it is slightly at the diminishing direction. But the audio books are coming up like anything in addition to printed books. So here I think that the storytelling can be incorporated through audiobooks. There is another important thing is that in audiobooks, the movement of the books is very fast. Only issue with the audiobooks NBT is facing till now is the business model of that. Downloads, how to give royalty to the original writer. So
Right.
because the digital content is as an technology person, if you ask, they will say that everything can be hacked.
Right.
Your account is not hacked because you are not on the radar. That's all.
Right.
Technologically, it is possible.
Right.
Now, that is the big challenge, how we can go for a digital story books in an audio format
Right.
with the protection.
Right.
Another important thing is that fortunately, National Book Trust has got a support from the Ministry of Education specifically for Northeast. I would like to make one point very clear over here with this August gathering. Though we are under Ministry of Education, not a single rupee is given to us for book publication, even for any book fair. It is all commercially viable we have to manage.
Okay.
And that's why there is always a one point of sellability.
Yes.
Sellability. But fortunately, I don't know, because of the policy of the government to look east, and perhaps it has gone from look east to act east. They are giving some additional funds. So definitely we are going for northeastern states, identifying young writers and storytellers, because we have experienced in our one of the initiative of PM Yuva series, an author below 30 years, if he writes, his language is connectable to the young audience today. So
Obviously.
it is, yeah. So that's why we are looking for, but definitely audiobooks and storytelling can be blended, and NBT is for that.
No, it's gladdening to know that there's a specific focus on the Northeast here, and keep looking east, I would say. Ma'am, we now kind of look at technology. He mentioned the role of technology here. So one elephant in the room in any books discussion happens to be AI and the use of AI and machine learning. Do you think AI and bots, they will ultimately replace authors? What's your view in it? We'll also have Nikhil's take on it after you speaking.
Well, I'll tell you another story about explaining the use of AI. I recently penned my father's biography from Sylhet to Shillong. He was from, I'm a mixed parentage. My father was from Sylhet and a very proud Sylheti, and my mother is Khasi from a very traditional home. But I grew up as a Khasi because my father encouraged us. He said, I don't want you to have a crisis of identity, so please grow up as Khasis. Because he came, when he was 7 years old, he had come up, and he was not very ritualistic or religious, you know. So I'll tell you a story about the biography and why I think AI will not work. You know, when my father passed away, my mother, the first thing she said before she started grieving was, you know, you call a Sylheti relative, Nepalda, and everything must be done exactly according to his custom, what his mother and father would like. So then everything was done, the shraddh was done, and then to immerse the remains in the Ganges, it took some time because it was not auspicious or something. So he, you know, Ronuda, the priest said, you keep it in a, you know, in a bowl, in a container, and well guarded. And every day, Bijoyan, my brother, had to, you know, take the bowl and say a prayer and say, you know, Papa, we are sorry, we cannot immerse you immediately, but the Pandit has to choose the auspicious time. So one day, and I was the only sibling who had the guts to actually sit with him, my brother, because everyone was so emotional. And one day, Bijoyan looked at me and said, Bijoya, I mean, this is all that's left of Dad. And, you know, my father was a towering figure and a top cop, and his book is here, the biography. And I knew at that moment that Bijoyan was going to do something, and he was first he started, he established an equestrian trophy for the police, which is still, you know, going around. But for example, AI cannot capture a moment like that, and I don't think the emotions which I put in this book could ever be captured by AI, because I can give all the information, but the emotions would not have come. So that's what I feel about creative writing.
That's the emotion part. Thank God for it, that the tribe of authors will keep that going. What are your views, Nikhil, on this?
I have absolutely no doubt that AI will completely upend the publishing industry and other media industries as well. Let me tell you why I think so. Firstly, with technology, you have to have a perspective of the next 10 years, 20 years. It's not only about today and where we are today, but how will this evolve over the next decade or 2 decades. I'll give you a simple example. You take any major movie studio globally. Let's take Warner Brothers. They have an entire department that what does it do? When you go to them with a screenplay, that screenplay is fed into their so-called proprietary systems, which are now evolving into more AI-driven systems, which will actually analyze that screenplay from the perspective of box office. How much money can this screenplay potentially make if we actually invest behind it, right? And that's it. The decision making is 99% driven by that, right? Finally, someone will sign off on it and there'll be some other elements of that deal, but fundamentally it is driven through that process. So what will start happening is, as more publishing companies, etc., start using this kind of analytical AI-driven tools, their choices that they make will be driven much more by profit and by what will sell, how much will it sell, should I invest behind this or not, and much less the power of the editor in choosing, which authors he wants to back will reduce. You're already seeing it in the film industry. It will definitely happen in publishing as well as we move forward. The second element is that there are some routine tasks that AI can clearly do better already. It's like, for example, correction of grammar and cleaning out, languages, etc. Machines can do that better than humans now and much faster, and you will see that getting replaced. So yes, I definitely feel that there's going to be turmoil, appending, much more market-driven, decision making, which is why I think organizations like the National Book Trust, etc., will have a critical role to play in actually, searching for new authors who otherwise will not get published because, the machine will say, hey, we're not going to make money of this.
Oh, that's interesting. But you
I
mentioned,
feel that,
taking on from the point you said, a machine decides whether it's commercially viable or not, but to make that commercially viable, the machine is not still producing original content. The content is still being produced by a human being, right?
Yes and no, but if you look at what's happening already with short format video, right, where you can literally type in text cues and the damn machine invents all the visuals, right? Especially with VFX and with advertisements in that space. It's inventing, so there's no copyright issues. It's actually inventing, entire scenes and things depending on your visual cues. Now think of where that machine is going to be 10 years from now, right? So it will happen across, I think, I might be wrong, and I hope for all of our sakes that I'm wrong, but I suspect it will happen across all forms of media as we evolve.
Fine. I think we're getting a cue to maybe wind up. Do we have any opportunity for interactive? Any questions? Are there any questions in the audience here?
May I add something here?
Yes, please.
To this point? So I'm neither in favor of AI nor am I against AI. I'm somebody who likes to embrace change and try to evolve. I'll tell you why. You mentioned about AI, Warner Brothers doing this and that. Even now, humans are also doing that. People, the creative heads or the producers who are there, they're also judging the content by how much of a profit it can make in the market. And secondly, with the human intervention, there's also this human bias. Not every writer gets an opportunity, only the favorites get. Not every director gets the opportunity, only the favorites get. So I think I'd rather have an AI who is impartial over a human who is partial. Now, I'm not in favor of AI. I am a writer. I'm a full-time writer. Thing is, recently I had my book launched. It's called Dakini. And it's a commercial fiction. And I did something called character intros for my book. Just like in movies, you've got these animated posters of each character so that I can attract more readers into this. And I've done this for my previous books as well. And I personally do it. I don't hire anybody. I don't have the resources. But the thing is, earlier I used to do it on Photoshop. Then I used to transfer them to After Effects and then animate it. Took me a lot of computer power. And it also took me like 3 to 4 days for one 10-second clip, to make it. I generated around 20 characters, or 20 animations in just one day. And so perfect that it saved me a lot of time, a lot of money, and it's been appreciated like anything, except obviously on Instagram I had to put an AI label that it's created by AI. But I think as creators, we have to embrace this. This change is inevitable.
Lovely, lovely. So I think Professor Marathe has a view on it. But in a room full of storytellers, I think this is a debate we can also keep for the next Anant Samagam. It's got everybody animated. Maybe last word from Professor Marathe.
I would like to comment quickly on this AI issue. What Sir has said is very correct. It is going to be all pervasive. But as Hariji said, actually it can be used as a enabler. So it should be a good blend of artificial intelligence and author.
And used responsibly.
Use responsibility. I will tell you one small example. If I have to translate 200-page book through an author, if I give an assignment, then he will take its own time of 2 months, 3 months. Perhaps it can go depending upon the availability, mood, because it's always valid. There is no, I'm not commenting in negative way. But there are good translators using AI, no doubt, they are genre specific. For example, scientific books, then there is a vocabulary. But you will find that when we give it to translator through machine learning version, the time is reduced by 1/3. So within 30% of the time, the final corrections will be done by the author, but the basic things will be done by machine through AI, and that's why I feel that it's an enabler. One last sentence, just understand what is AI. It's an artificial intelligence. Still real intelligence is with the authors, and it will not go away anywhere.
True.
Lovely. Final word.
Yeah.
So AI is, after all, intelligence. And as long as human intelligence is a few steps ahead of them, the tribe of authors, translators, publishers will still have their jobs. And that may be a theme for the next Samagam, I guess. That's something we'll all appreciate. And we hope we have a few Samagams before AI, leaves us all far behind. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lovely. Do we have any time for interaction? Do we have any questions?
You can take one or two questions.
One or two questions. The lady in the front here.
Yeah. It's on.
Just quickly, I couldn't resist. I'm Shonali, Bijoya's cousin, and the Bengali side of the family. So that's most exciting to be with her today and just hearing her amazing perspective of life and how we should actually bring ourselves to anything in life. Respect is so essential. Thanks, Kong Bibi, to be sort of front and center that. But I just couldn't help respond to what Hari you said. AI is not unbiased by whatever stretch of imagination.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, here we
because
go.
it's a learning device, and by virtue of who was on AI first. So if, for example, the northern white got onto AI first, it's how AI will require. So just, I don't want you to respond, just hear me out. So this tribe that is on the stage today, that represents Northeast, their stories are not on AI. So if they get there and they start speaking and telling and what Jasmine is trying to do, what Kong Bibi is trying to do, maybe in 10 years, Nikhil, AI will be able to tell the stories of Northeast, but not today, because there's nothing there for anyone to hear. So I feel so strongly for what today Jasmine and Kong Bibi have been saying, that their stories need to be heard for even AI to make sense of it. So we are not there yet. So when AI throws up something, it's picking its reference from the global north, from Europe, from places that have no relevance to our lives. So please just think about that, and that's
That's the bias of AI. Lady in the back, final question.
In the interest of time, I'll just wind up real quick. Hello, everyone. My name is Nazia, and I come from a storytelling background. My question is for Mr. Hari. In the writing process, nothing about AI. When we begin writing, we begin with an idea. The concept is very different. Once you're in the process, there's a lot of biases that slowly start to creep in. And you certainly or suddenly start to modify the whole, the narrative. Do you like really stick to the original idea, or do you let it flow?
Nikhil ji mentioned something. I also write like a screenwriter first. I have a beat sheet ready for my books. For my story, I have a clear-cut skeleton that this is the flow that I need. I can't write without that. So that basic idea is always there. And then if it's a character-driven story, which most of the time it is, at least till now it has been like that. So it has always been my character. If she or he, until now I've only written she, so if she changes for some reason in the middle of the story because of some idea or some incident that I've seen in the news or something, then yes, it might affect the beat sheet. Then I have to go back to the beat sheet.
So storyboarding always helps. That's what you're saying, right?
You need a structure. The beginning, the end, then you have the structure, and then you stick to it. But sometimes when you're writing, you may find something new out there, and then when you send it to the editor, you'll get a whole new set of feedbacks.
Thank you so much.
I think it's fine. It's a time-saving, assistant, definitely. But for a creative writer, I think, we still have to use our brains as much as possible, excepting for correction.
So,
and stuff
but the
like
beauty and the cadence and what Jasmine wants to say is we're still miles ahead. She would like to, I think, read one excerpt which will still, not be on
Tell
the
us why
radar
I
of it.
cannot replace,
Yes,
actual
yes,
storytelling.
please make it quick because we're getting a cue to wind up.
So I'm just going to read out a short excerpt from one of the stories in my book. And this is from the story called Mchifali Aloy. Loosely translated, it means the woman Mchifali. And it's the story about, two lovers who, go beyond the mortal life as well. In a sense that, this young man and woman, they get married. The young bride is slayed by this woman called Mchifali. And she takes the place of the wife, but the man, being a gentleman, of course, continues to live with that woman. But the slain woman comes back in different, forms, in metaphysical forms to woo the husband back. So I'm just going to read out a short snippet, and it goes like this. One day as the husband went out to get Rachak, he noticed an extraordinarily slender and beautiful Evo near the stream where he had rested and where he had lost his beautiful wife. Evo, by the way, Hoinu, and those of us from the Northeast would be familiar with the ingredient. It's bamboo shoot, right? Yeah. He wistfully looked at it and said to himself, "Dear Evo, I wish you could take me back to the day I came here with my lovely wife." Story continues. He takes the Evo back home and tells that wicked woman Mchifali, the substitute wife, to cook it. So as Mchifali cooked it over the fire, the Evo started boiling and making a strange sound. Usually when curry is boiled, they say, "Valalak, valalak, valalak." But this was not the same sound today. As she listened carefully, the boiling curry sang, "Mchifali, valalak, valalak, oyim rafure choyo, valalak, valalak." And this is why the feel and the passion with which stories are told cannot be replaced, I believe, by AI. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Great way to end it. And may this tradition keep going forward with storytellers like you. I'm grateful to each of you to bring your stories here. And we all feel enriched, and let's all keep supporting this. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the organizers, Anant Samagam, for this beautiful session and bringing this group of people together. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Asheesh Sharma, Chairman Sir, as well as all you amazing storytellers. Your journey has been most inspiring for us. And look at the variety of topics that we discussed today. We can go on and on. Now, we request you to just stay on the stage for a quick photo session and felicitations. And may I call Rini Joy, Dr. Rini Joy, founder of AalekhArts Foundation. Atul ji, he's coming up.